The morning sun hit the polished floor of Oak Ridge Academy as Zara Williams took her first steps into the grand hallway. She was 16, with bright eyes that had seen many first days before, but none quite like this. Her heart beat fast under her carefully chosen outfit, dark blue jeans and a simple white blouse that her mom had ironed twice to make sure it looked perfect. Behind her, the heavy wooden doors closed with a thud that seemed to echo through the entire building. Suddenly, the busy hallway went quiet. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Eyes stared. Zara gripped her backpack straps tighter and kept walking, one foot in front of the other. That's what her dad always said when things got tough. Just keep moving forward. You earned that scholarship, he had reminded her that morning over breakfast. Your brain got you there, not anyone's charity. Her dad, Dr. Williams, was known back in Chicago as one of the best brain surgeons in the state. Their move to this small, rich town had been unexpected. The hospital had called him personally, offering him a position most doctors would fight over. So the Williams family packed up their life in the big city and moved to a place where the houses were bigger, the streets were cleaner, and as Zara was quickly learning, the faces were all white. She followed the map in her hand, looking for locker number 217. As she walked, the whispers started behind her. Is she lost? Who let her in? Probably some diversity thing. Bet she's not even that smart. Zara pretended not to hear, but each word stung like tiny paper cuts. She finally found her locker and fumbled with the combination lock, aware of the stairs burning into her back. It took 3 tries to get it open, her fingers shaking slightly. A group of girls walked by, their expensive perfume leaving a cloud in the air. One of them, a tall girl with perfect blonde hair, looked Zara up and down before whispering something that made the others laugh. Zara took a deep breath and placed her extra notebooks in the locker. The scholarship letter had arrived 3 months ago after she'd scored in the top 1% on the national test. Her parents had jumped around the kitchen like little kids, so proud they could barely speak. Now, standing in this cold hallway, Zara wondered if it had been a mistake. The bell rang, making her jump. Students rushed around her like a river flowing around a rock. No one spoke to her. No one offered to help. She pulled out her schedule and tried to make sense of the room numbers. You look lost, a voice finally said. Zara turned to see a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a coffee stain on his tie. I'm looking for room 112. Advanced chemistry, she said. The man's eyebrows went up slightly, but he quickly smiled. That's just down this hall. Take a left at the trophy case, first door on the right. Zara thanked him and headed in that direction. She didn't see the man watch her go with a troubled look on his face. Room 112 was already half full when she entered. Again, the talking stopped. 20 pairs of eyes locked onto her. The teacher, a woman with gray-streaked hair, pulled into a tight bun, checked her paper. You must be Zara Williams, she said, making it sound almost like an accusation. Yes, ma'am, Zara replied politely, the way her mother had taught her. We don't usually get transfer students in advanced chemistry, the teacher said. It's quite rigorous here at Oak Ridge. Zara nodded. I understand. I was in the honors program at my last school. The teacher's lips pressed into a thin line. Well, we'll see how you keep up. Take the empty seat in the back. As Zara walked to the last empty desk, she noticed Principal Harrison pass by the classroom door. Their eyes met briefly. This was the same man who had shaken her parents' hands just last week, telling them how excited Oak Ridge was to welcome such a brilliant young student. Now he quickly looked away and kept walking. Zara sat down, opened her notebook, and wrote the date at the top of a clean page. Her first class at Oak Ridge Academy was about to begin, and she was the only black student in a sea of white faces. But she hadn't come this far to give up on day one. 1 foot in front of the other. She straightened her back, held her head high, and picked up a pen. 3 weeks flew by like pages ripped from a calendar. Zara sat alone at the back of her English class, watching rain streak down the windows. The excitement she'd felt on her first day had dried up faster than puddles in summer heat. She raised her hand when the teacher asked about the symbolism in To Kill a Mockingbird. Her arm stayed up so long it started to ache, but Mr. Peterson's eyes swept right over her, calling on 3 other students instead. Zara slowly lowered her hand, adding another invisible tally mark to her growing collection of times she'd been ignored. The bell rang and students rushed out for lunch. Zara packed her notebook carefully, taking her time. She'd learned that the hallways were easier to navigate when they weren't packed with people who pretended not to see her. In the cafeteria, she spotted an empty seat at a table with a few girls from her math class. As she approached, a blonde girl quickly placed her bag on the chair. "Sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "We're saving this for someone." That someone never showed up, but Zara was already walking away, cheeks burning. She found a spot at the end of a table near the trash cans. No one joined her. Opening her lunch bag, she pulled out the sandwich her mom had made that morning. Her appetite was gone, but she forced herself to eat anyway. Her mother would ask about lunch, and Zara wouldn't worry her with the truth. "Hey, brain girl," a voice called out. Zara looked up to see a tall boy from her chemistry class. He wasn't alone. "I heard you got a B- on Peterson's essay," he said with a smirk. "Guess you're not as smart as everyone thought." Zara said nothing. That essay had been one of her best works. She'd stayed up until midnight perfecting it, making sure every sentence flowed into the next like a clear stream. Back in Chicago, her teachers had used her papers as examples. Here, mediocre work from certain students somehow earned A's while her polished essays barely scraped by. After lunch came gym class. Coach Winters was picking teams for volleyball. Zara stood tall, confident in at least this one thing. She'd been captain of her old school's team, had even played in state championships. "Coach," she said when all the teams were formed and she was still standing alone, "you forgot to pick me." The woman barely glanced at her. "We have even teams today. You can keep score." Zara's throat tightened as she took the clipboard. Through the gym windows, she could see the volleyball court where she should have been playing. The sting of rejection felt like tiny needles under her skin. After school, Zara walked to her locker, eager to go home. The day had dragged on like a broken clock. She turned the corner and stopped dead in her tracks. Someone had written a word on her locker. An ugly word scrawled in black marker. The kind of word that made her stomach turn to ice. Students passed by, some staring, some giggling, some looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. A teacher walked by too, a man with glasses who taught history. He saw the word, hesitated for just a second, then continued down the hall as if he'd seen nothing at all. Zara stood frozen, her backpack suddenly feeling like it weighed 100 pounds. She wanted to cry, to scream, to run away. Instead, she pulled out a tissue from her pocket, wet it from her water bottle, and silently began to rub at the hateful letters until her fingers hurt. That night at dinner, her parents asked about school as they always did. "It's fine," Zara lied, pushing green beans around her plate. "I'm just still adjusting." Her mother smiled, relieved. "That's normal, honey. It takes time to find your place." Her father nodded in agreement. "You're doing great. We're so proud of you." Only her 10-year-old brother Tyler gave her a long look from across the table. Later, as she helped him with his math homework, he asked in a quiet voice, "Are the kids at your school nice?" Zara paused, pencil hovering over his notebook. "Some of them," she said. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Zara curled up under her blankets and finally let the tears come. She cried silently into her pillow, careful not to wake anyone. The moon cast shadows through her window as she wiped her eyes and made a decision. She wouldn't let them see her break. She wouldn't give them that power. Tomorrow, she would hold her head high again, raise her hand again, try again. But deep inside, a small voice wondered how long she could keep going, how many more days she could walk through those halls alone. The history classroom was filled with afternoon sunlight as students filed in after lunch. Zara took her usual seat near the window, away from everyone else. She opened her notebook, ready for another hour of being invisible. The bell rang, but instead of Mr. Collins, a different teacher walked in. He was younger, with dark-rimmed glasses and a bright blue tie that stood out against his white shirt. "Good afternoon," he said, placing his briefcase on the desk. "I'm Mr. Daniels. Mr. Collins had to take a leave of absence, so I'll be your history teacher for the rest of the semester." Whispers rippled through the classroom. Zara watched the new teacher carefully. He had a kind face and spoke with a slight Boston accent. Something about him felt different from the other teachers. I know I'm jumping in mid-semester, Mr. Daniels continued, but I believe history isn't just about memorizing dates and names. It's about understanding the people behind those events, especially the ones our textbooks often leave out. He turned to write on the whiteboard, overlooked historical figures who changed America. This will be your next project, he explained. You'll work in pairs to research someone who made significant contributions to American history but didn't get the credit they deserved. Hands shot up across the room as students began calling out names of famous people. Mr. Daniels smiled patiently, listening to each suggestion. From the front row, a girl with perfectly styled hair and expensive clothes raised her hand. Zara recognized her as Olivia Cooper, the student body president who seemed to run the social scene at Oak Ridge. Yes, Miss Cooper. Mr. Daniels called on her. Olivia smirked, glancing back at Zara before speaking. I bet Zara is going to choose someone black, right? That's the obvious choice for her. The room went silent. A few students snickered. Zara felt her face grow hot as all eyes turned toward her. Mr. Daniels' expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He set down his marker and leaned against his desk. Actually, Miss Cooper, he said calmly, that's an interesting point you've raised. Our textbooks do tend to overlook many black historical figures. Since you've shown such insight into this issue, I'd like you to research Claudette Colvin for your project. Olivia's smirk faded. Who? Claudette Colvin. She was arrested for refusing to give up her bus seat to a white person 9 months before Rosa Parks did the same thing. She was just 15 years old. Mr. Daniels smiled. And since you seem so interested in Zara's project, you two will be partners. The shock on Olivia's face matched what Zara felt. Work with Olivia Cooper, the girl who had been whispering about her since day one. But Mr. Daniels, Olivia protested, I usually work with Ashley or Taylor. I think it's good to mix things up, Mr. Daniels replied firmly. Everyone, find your partners. I've posted the assignment details online. You'll have 3 weeks to complete this project, and you'll need to meet outside of class. As students shuffled around the room, Olivia stayed frozen in her seat. Zara didn't move either. The bell eventually rang, and everyone filed out, leaving just the 3 of them in the classroom. Mr. Daniels, Olivia started, I really think. Miss Cooper, he interrupted gently, I'm new here, but I'm not blind. This project isn't just about history, it's about learning to work with people who are different from you. That's a life skill much more valuable than anything in our textbook. He turned to Zara. Ms. Williams, I've read your transcript from your previous school. Your history essays were exceptional. I look forward to seeing what you two create together. With that, he gathered his papers and left the room, leaving Zara and Olivia alone in uncomfortable silence. Let's just get this over with, Olivia finally said with a sigh. Library after school tomorrow? Zara nodded, not trusting her voice. As Olivia walked out, Zara slowly gathered her books, wondering if this project would make things better or much, much worse. The next day, Zara arrived at the library 10 minutes early. She chose a table near the back, spreading out her notebooks and the research she'd already done on Claudette Colvin. She didn't expect Olivia to show up on time, if at all. To her surprise, Olivia walked in at exactly 3:30, her designer bag slung over her shoulder. She sat down across from Zara without a greeting and pulled out her laptop. So who exactly is this Claudette person again? She asked, not looking up from her screen. Claudette Colvin was a teenager who refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus in Montgomery, Alabama, Zara explained. It was March 2, 1955. Everyone learns about Rosa Parks, but Claudette did it first. Then why don't we learn about her? Olivia asked, finally looking at Zara. The civil rights leaders didn't think she'd make a good face for the movement. She was young, outspoken, and, Zara hesitated, she got pregnant soon after her arrest. That's messed up, Olivia said, surprising Zara with what seemed like genuine interest. They sidelined her because she wasn't perfect enough. For the next hour, they worked mostly in silence, occasionally sharing information they found. When Olivia struggled to understand the complex legal background of bus segregation, Zara explained it clearly, connecting it to other historical events. Olivia looked at Zara with newfound confusion. How do you know all this stuff? History was my favorite subject back in Chicago, Zara said with a small shrug. My grandpa was a history professor. We used to talk about this kind of thing all the time. Something shifted in Olivia's expression, not friendship, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of respect. As they packed up to leave, Mr. Daniels appeared from between the bookshelves. How's the project coming along? Fine, they both said at the same time, then glanced at each other in surprise. Mr. Daniels smiled. I'm glad to hear it. Remember, this isn't just about getting a grade. It's about bringing forgotten voices back into the conversation. As they walked out of the library together, Olivia and Zara didn't speak. But for the first time since she arrived at Oak Ridge, Zara felt the tiniest spark of hope. Rain pounded against the windows of the small bookstore as Zara and Olivia huddled in the history section. They had been working on their project for over a week now, meeting after school in a library, but today they needed to find more sources. Look at this, Zara said, pointing to a photo in a civil rights book. This is actually her, Claudette Colvin. There aren't many pictures of her from back then. Olivia leaned closer, studying the black and white image of the young girl with determined eyes. She looks so normal, just a kid our age. That's kind of the point, Zara said quietly. Regular people change history all the time, but we only hear about a few of them. They gathered their books and headed to the counter. As the cashier rang up their purchases, Zara noticed the woman's eyes darting between her and Olivia with a confused expression. You two from Oak Ridge? The woman asked, looking at Olivia's jacket with the school logo. Yes, Olivia answered, barely glancing up from her phone. School project. The woman continued, still looking between them. Obviously, Olivia muttered. After paying, they walked toward the coffee shop next door. Zara stayed a step behind, watching as the bookstore clerk moved to the window, tracking them with her eyes. What was that about? Zara asked once they were settled at a table with hot chocolates. Olivia shrugged. People around here aren't used to seeing Oak Ridge kids hanging out with, well, you know. With black people, Zara finished flatly. Olivia shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did, Zara said, but without anger. It's okay. At least you're being honest about it. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain creating a gentle backdrop to their awkward conversation. Did you notice how that woman followed you around the store? Olivia suddenly asked. Not me. Just you. Zara nodded slowly. I always notice. It happens everywhere. That's not right, Olivia said, looking genuinely troubled. Welcome to my world, Zara replied, taking a sip of her hot chocolate. Something changed in Olivia's expression, a flicker of understanding that hadn't been there before. The next day at school, they sat together in the library during lunch, spreading their research across the table. Mr. Rivera, their English teacher, walked by and did a double take. Ms. Cooper, Ms. Williams, he said with surprise. Working on the history project? Yes, sir, Zara replied. Mr. Rivera nodded, then looked directly at Olivia. Ms. Cooper, I'm assuming you're handling the writing portion. Given Ms. Williams' background, she might need extra help with the technical aspects. Before Zara could respond, Olivia sat up straight. Actually, sir, Zara's doing most of the writing. She's much better at it than I am. I've never gotten an A on an essay without tons of help, but Zara's already written for her school newspaper in Chicago. The teacher's smile froze. I see. Well, carry on then. He walked away stiffly. Zara stared at Olivia in shock. Why did you say that? Because it's true, Olivia said simply, returning to her notes. And I'm tired of pretending it's not. Over the next few days, something shifted between them. During history class, Olivia moved to sit next to Zara. At lunch, they continued to work together, drawing curious glances from other students. One afternoon, as they walked to Zara's house to finish their presentation, Olivia grew quiet. Can I tell you something? She finally asked as they turned onto Zara's street. Sure, Zara replied, surprised by Olivia's serious tone. Everyone thinks my life is perfect, Olivia said, kicking a stone on the sidewalk. Student body president, rich parents, big house, whatever. But it's all fake. My dad's never home, and when he is, nothing I do is ever good enough. My mom's on anxiety medication because she's so stressed about keeping up appearances. I haven't actually enjoyed anything in, I don't even know how long. Zara didn't know what to say. This was a side of Olivia no one at school ever saw. Sorry for dumping that on you, Olivia mumbled. It's okay, Zara replied. That's what happens when you actually get to know someone. The perfect image never matches the real person. Olivia smiled slightly. Is that from a book or something? Nope, just something my grandpa used to say. By the time presentation day arrived, they had put together something special. Mr. Daniels had scheduled them last, almost as an afterthought, assuming their project would be like all the others, a basic PowerPoint with some facts and dates. But when Zara and Olivia stood at the front of the class, something different happened. They didn't just present facts about Claudette Colvin, they told her story in a way that made her come alive. Zara spoke about what it meant to be a teenager standing up against a system built to keep you down. Olivia connected Claudette's experience to modern examples of injustice that surprised everyone with her insight. The room fell silent as they finished. No one moved. No one whispered. For once, everyone was actually listening. Then Olivia stepped forward again. We have one more thing to add. It wasn't part of the assignment, but we think it's important. She glanced at Zara, who nodded encouragingly. We've been studying how people were treated unfairly in the past, Olivia continued, but the truth is, it still happens today. Right here, in our school. The room tensed. Mr. Daniels leaned forward at his desk. When someone is followed in stores because of how they look, when their ideas are ignored because of who they are, when they're given lower grades for the same work, that's discrimination. It might be quieter than it was in Claudette's time, but it's still wrong. Olivia didn't name names or point fingers, but everyone knew exactly what, and who, she was talking about. Zara stood beside her, heart pounding but head held high. Mr. Daniels was the first to clap when they finished. Slowly, other students joined in. Some looked uncomfortable, others thoughtful. A few couldn't meet Zara's eyes. That, Mr. Daniels said when the applause died down, is exactly what history should teach us. Not just what happened then, but what's still happening now. Excellent work, both of you. And plus. As they returned to their seats, Zara felt different. For the first time since coming to Oak Ridge, she wasn't completely alone. And judging by the mix of reactions around the classroom, some students whispering, others looking guilty, a few actually smiling at her, something important had just changed. Word spread fast at Oak Ridge Academy. By lunchtime the day after their presentation, everyone was talking about Zara and Olivia. Some students looked at them with newfound respect. Others whispered behind their hands, clearly unhappy about the change. Zara walked into the cafeteria, tray in hand, scanning the room out of habit for an empty corner. Before she could head to her usual lonely spot, she heard Olivia's voice. Zara, over here. Olivia was waving from her usual table in the center of the cafeteria. The popular kids' table. Zara hesitated, sure this must be some kind of joke. Come on, Olivia called again, patting the empty seat beside her. Taking a deep breath, Zara walked over, aware of every eye watching her progress across the room. She set her tray down carefully, still half expecting someone to pull the chair away at the last second. Hey, she said, sliding into the seat. Around the table sat Olivia, her boyfriend Ryan Wells, the school's basketball star, and their usual crowd. Some nodded hello. Others stared at their food. Ryan looked like someone had forced him to swallow something sour. We were just talking about Mr. Peterson's English test tomorrow, Olivia said, acting like this was completely normal. I'm totally going to fail if I don't figure out the symbolism in that last chapter. I could help, Zara offered quietly. I finished the book last week. Ryan snorted. Of course you did. Olivia shot him a look. That would be great, actually. The conversation moved on awkwardly. Zara ate slowly, saying little. She could feel Ryan watching her, his jaw tight. Finally, he couldn't hold back anymore. So what exactly are you doing? He asked Olivia, but his eyes were on Zara. Eating lunch, Olivia replied coolly. You know what I mean. Ryan lowered his voice. Is this some kind of charity project? Make friends with the new girl so you look good for college applications. The table went silent. Zara's cheeks burned. She started to stand up, ready to leave, but Olivia caught her arm. No, Olivia said firmly. It's called being decent, Ryan. You should try it sometime. Ryan's face darkened. Whatever. I didn't sign up for this. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly across the floor. Let me know when you're done with your little social justice phase. He stalked off, and two of his friends quickly followed. The remaining students at the table looked back and forth between Zara and Olivia, clearly trying to decide which side to take. One by one, half of them got up and left. The others stayed, uncomfortable but not cruel. Olivia acted like nothing had happened, offering Zara her pudding cup since she didn't want it. You didn't have to do that, Zara said quietly when the bell rang and they were gathering their things. Yes, I did, Olivia replied, and I'm not sorry. After school, Zara headed to her locker, surprised to find Mr. Daniels waiting there. Ms. Williams, he said with a smile. Just the person I was looking for. Is something wrong with our project? Zara asked, immediately worried. Not at all. In fact, it was exceptional. Mr. Daniels looked around to make sure no one was listening. I wanted to talk to you about the academic decathlon team. Zara's eyebrows rose. The academic decathlon was Oak Ridge's pride and joy. A team of the school's brightest students who competed against other schools in various subjects. What about it? She asked cautiously. We're struggling with our science and math sections, Mr. Daniels explained. I saw from your records that those are your strongest subjects. Coach Brennan is looking for new members. Zara almost laughed. Coach Brennan doesn't like me very much. Coach Brennan doesn't like losing even more, Mr. Daniels said with a small smile. And Oak Ridge has lost to Lincoln Prep 3 years in a row. I don't know. Zara started, thinking about how much resistance she'd face from the team. Just think about it, Mr. Daniels said. Tryouts are next Monday after school. That evening at dinner, Zara mentioned the academic team to her parents. Her mother practically bounced out of her chair with excitement. That's wonderful, honey. This is exactly the kind of opportunity we hoped you'd find here. Her father nodded proudly. Their team is very prestigious. It would look excellent on college applications. Only Tyler, her little brother, saw through her forced smile. Do you actually want to do it? He asked later as she helped him with homework. Zara sighed. I don't know. I love academic competitions, but I don't love being where I'm not wanted. Dad says sometimes you have to kick the door down if no one will open it for you, Tyler said, chewing on his pencil. The following Monday, Zara stood outside the classroom where tryouts were being held. Through the window, she could see about 15 students inside, most of whom had never spoken to her. Coach Brennan was at the front, a stern woman with decades of competition experience. Just as Zara was losing her nerve, Olivia appeared beside her. You came, Olivia said. I was hoping you would. You're trying out too? Zara asked in surprise. Olivia nodded. I'm not as smart as you, but I'm good at public speaking and debate. Plus, she added with a wink, I nominated you to Coach Brennan last week. Zara's mouth fell open. You what? Come on, Olivia said, opening the door. Let's show them what you can do. The tryout consisted of sample questions from previous competitions. When Coach Brennan reluctantly called on Zara for the first time, a physics question that had most of the room stumped, Zara answered perfectly, explaining the concept so clearly that even the coach looked impressed. By the end of the hour, there was no denying Zara's abilities. Even the current team captain, a senior named David, had to admit she knew her stuff. Coach Brennan cleared her throat at the end. Thank you all for coming. Results will be posted tomorrow. As everyone filed out, Coach Brennan called Zara back. Ms. Williams. A word. Zara steeled herself for rejection as Olivia gave her an encouraging smile and left. You did well today, Coach Brennan said stiffly. Thank you, Zara replied. I'll be honest with you. Some parents and administrators have concerns about changing the team dynamic this close to the state championship. Zara fought to keep her expression neutral. I understand. However, Coach Brennan continued, your test scores speak for themselves. I'm putting you on the team, but consider yourself on probation. One missed practice, one poor performance, and you're out. Is that clear? Zara nodded, hardly believing what she was hearing. Yes, ma'am. Crystal clear. The next day, Zara's name appeared on the list of team members. The whispers started immediately. In her classes, the existing team members, all white, mostly from wealthy families, avoided eye contact. During the first practice session, she found herself mysteriously left off the email list for study materials. At the second practice, no one wanted to pair with her for drills. "Give them time," Olivia whispered when she noticed Zara's frustration. "They'll come around when they see how good you are." But Zara wasn't so sure. As she walked home that evening, she wondered if joining the team had been a mistake. A car slowed beside her, and her heart jumped until she realized it was Mr. Daniels. "Need a ride?" he offered. "It's about to rain." "No thanks," Zara said. "I'm almost home." Mr. Daniels nodded. "How's the team going?" Zara looked down at her shoes. "They don't want me there." "Not yet," Mr. Daniels corrected. "But they will. Sometimes change takes time, Zara. And sometimes it just takes one person brave enough to stay in the room they weren't meant to be in." As rain began to fall, Zara watched Mr. Daniels drive away, his words echoing in her mind. One person brave enough to stay. She squared her shoulders and walked on, raindrops mixing with the tears she refused to let anyone see. 2 weeks before the state championship, disaster struck the Oak Ridge academic decathlon team. Coach Brennan called an emergency meeting after school, her face unusually pale. "I have difficult news," she announced to the team gathered in the classroom. "My sister was in a serious car accident this morning. I need to fly to Arizona immediately to help with her children. I'll be gone for at least a month." The room erupted with questions and concerns. Who would coach them? Would the competition be postponed? What about their practice schedule? "Principal Harrison is looking for a replacement," Coach Brennan explained, "but this close to the championship, it's unlikely we'll find someone qualified." Zara sat quietly in the back corner, watching the team fall apart. Despite weeks of cold shoulders and forgotten study sessions, she'd shown up to every practice, answered every question correctly, and slowly proven her worth. Some team members had grudgingly begun to accept her presence. Others still acted like she was invisible. After Coach Brennan left, the team captain called an unofficial meeting at the library. "We can't give up now," David insisted. "We've worked too hard." "Without a coach, we're finished," another student argued. "Lincoln Prep will destroy us like they always do." "Maybe we could coach ourselves," someone suggested. "We know the material." "That's ridiculous," David snapped. "We need structure, practice problems, someone to time our drills." From her corner of the table, Zara watched them bicker. Her mind went to the study guides she'd been creating for herself since no one would share theirs, the practice questions she'd developed, the timing app she'd programmed on her laptop when no one would let her use the team stopwatch. "I have an idea," she said quietly. No one heard her. She cleared her throat and tried again, louder this time. "I have an idea." The table fell silent, everyone turning to stare at her. Some looked surprised, as if they'd forgotten she was there. "What if we create our own study schedule?" Zara suggested. "I've been making practice materials for myself. I could share them." David frowned. "You've been making your own materials?" Zara nodded. "I had to. No one would share theirs with me." Several team members had the decency to look embarrassed. "Let me see them," David demanded. Zara pulled her laptop from her bag and opened her files. The team crowded around as she showed them her carefully organized study guides, practice questions organized by difficulty level, timing sheets, and even a scorecard system to track improvements. "These are actually really good," David admitted reluctantly. "Better than Coach Brennan's in some ways." "I color-coded everything by subject," Zara explained. "And I linked related concepts so we can see how they connect." One by one, the team members scrolled through her work, looks of surprise and respect slowly replacing their skepticism. "We could use these," a junior named Alex said. "They're exactly what we need." "But who's going to run the practices?" someone asked. "We can't all be in charge." All eyes turned to Zara. "Oh no," she said quickly. "I'm just the new girl, remember?" "The new girl with the best study system we've ever seen," David pointed out. "And the highest practice scores." The next day, what remained of the Oak Ridge academic decathlon team gathered in their usual classroom after school. Without an official coach, they were technically just a study group now. But with Zara's materials printed and distributed to everyone, there was a new energy in the room. Let's start with science, Zara suggested, standing awkwardly at the front. The last 3 championships had at least 5 questions on thermodynamics. She'd never led anything before, never being the one everyone looked to for answers. Her voice shook at first, but as she began explaining concepts and running through practice questions, something shifted. She found her rhythm, her confidence, and the team responded, raising their hands, asking questions, taking notes. By the end of that first session, something had changed. No one said it out loud, but they'd all felt it. They worked well together, really well. Over the next week, they met every day after school. Zara adjusted her materials based on everyone's feedback, creating custom practice sets for each team member's weak areas. When someone struggled with a concept, she found new ways to explain it, drawing diagrams, using everyday examples. "How do you make everything so simple?" Alex asked one day after Zara had broken down a complex calculus problem. "Coach Brennan's explanations always confused me more." Zara shrugged. "My dad's a surgeon. He always says if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough yourself." The day before the competition, disaster struck again. David called Zara in a panic. "I've got strep throat," he croaked through the phone. "Doctor says I'm contagious. I can't compete tomorrow." Zara's stomach dropped. David was their captain, their strongest competitor in multiple categories. "What do we do?" she asked. "The team took a vote," David said. "They want you to take my place as captain." Zara nearly dropped her phone. "Me? But I've only been on the team for a few weeks. The administration will never allow it." "They don't have a choice," David replied. "Competition rules state that if a captain can't compete, the team chooses the replacement. It's in the handbook." The next morning, Zara stood in the school parking lot as the team loaded onto the bus. Principal Harrison was there, looking deeply uncomfortable with the situation. "Ms. Williams," he said stiffly, "I understand the team has selected you as temporary captain." "Yes, sir," Zara replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. He frowned. "This is highly irregular. You're new to the school, new to the team." "And the best we've got," interrupted Alex, stepping up beside Zara. "We all voted. It was unanimous." One by one, the other team members moved to stand with Zara, an united front. The principal looked at them, then sighed in defeat. "Very well. But I hope you all realize what's at stake here. Oak Ridge's reputation." "We'll be just fine," Olivia cut in, joining the group with her debate team folder. "Better than fine." The competition was held at the State University, a massive event with teams from 20 schools across the region. The Lincoln Prep team, undefeated for 3 years running, walked in with matching blazers and confident smiles. Their captain, a tall boy with perfect posture, smirked when he saw Zara leading the Oak Ridge team. "New blood this year?" he asked David, who had come to support his team despite his illness. "Getting desperate, aren't you?" David just smiled. "You have no idea what's coming, Lincoln." The day was a blur of tests, quick response rounds, and team challenges. By the final lightning round, only 2 teams remained in contention, Lincoln Prep and Oak Ridge, neck and neck in points. Zara stepped up to the podium for the final face-off. Across from her stood Lincoln's captain, looking less confident than he had that morning. The judge read the first question, a complex physics problem that would have stumped most college students. Zara's hand hit the buzzer before the judge even finished speaking. "The answer is 3.47 times 10 to the negative 6 power," she said calmly. The judge blinked in surprise. "That is correct." Question after question came, covering everything from literature to advanced mathematics. Zara answered each one perfectly, her mind crystal clear, all the hours of preparation flowing through her. The audience watched in stunned silence as she single-handedly secured point after point. When the final score was announced, the Oak Ridge team erupted in cheers. They had won, not just by a little, but by the largest margin in the competition's history. As photographers snapped pictures of Zara holding the trophy with her teammates surrounding her, she caught sight of Principal Harrison in the crowd. The look on his face was priceless, a mixture of shock, pride, and the slow dawning realization that the girl they had tried so hard to keep invisible was now the most visible student at Oak Ridge Academy. The hallways of Oak Ridge Academy buzzed with excitement on the Monday after the championship. The trophy gleamed in the display case near the front entrance, surrounded by newspaper clippings with Zara's photo front and center. Her name was suddenly on everyone's lips. Did you see Zara in the City Herald? I heard she got a perfect score in the lightning round. Lincoln Prep's captain almost cried. Zara walked through the halls, feeling the strange sensation of being seen, truly seen, for the first time. Students who had never spoken to her now smiled and waved. Teachers who had questioned her abilities now used her papers as examples. Even Principal Harrison nodded respectfully when she passed his office. "This is weird," Zara whispered to Olivia as they walked to class together. "Last month, people acted like I had some kind of disease. Now they want to sit with me at lunch." Olivia shrugged. "People like winners, and you made Oak Ridge look good." "So I'm only worth something when I'm useful to them?" Zara asked. "I didn't say it was right," Olivia replied, "just how it is." Later that day, Zara opened her locker to find a small envelope taped inside. Inside was a handwritten note from Mr. Daniels, Principal's office, 315. "Don't worry, good news." Curious, Zara headed to the office after her last class. Inside, she found not only Principal Harrison and Mr. Daniels, but also several members of the school board and a photographer from the local newspaper. "Ah, Ms. Williams," Principal Harrison said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just the person we wanted to see. Please have a seat." Zara sat cautiously, looking around at the group. "We've been discussing the remarkable success of our academic decathlon team," Principal Harrison continued. "Your leadership was unexpected but impressive." Mr. Daniels caught Zara's eye and gave her a subtle wink. "In light of this achievement," Principal Harrison went on, "the board has decided to launch a new diversity initiative at Oak Ridge. We've always valued inclusion, of course." Zara fought to keep her face neutral. Always valued inclusion. Was that why she'd been ignored, isolated, and mocked for weeks? "We'd like you to be the face of this initiative," one of the board members added. "Your story is inspiring." "My story?" Zara asked, finding her voice. "Which part?" "The part where teachers ignored me when I raised my hand. Or when kids wrote slurs on my locker. Or maybe when I was left off team emails and had to create my own study materials." The room fell silent. The principal cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Ms. Williams, I understand there may have been some adjustment difficulties, but we're trying to move forward positively. The photographer is here to take your picture for the program announcement." Zara looked at their expectant faces. They wanted to use her now, her face, her victory, her story, but sanitized, polished, made palatable. They wanted the trophy without the struggle. "I need to think about it," she said finally, standing up. "Excuse me." She walked out, ignoring their protests. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, breathing deeply. Mr. Daniels followed her out a moment later. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I thought you should know what they were planning. I didn't expect them to spring it on you like that." "They don't care about diversity," Zara said. "They just care about looking good." Mr. Daniels nodded. "So make them do better." The next morning, Principal Harrison announced a special assembly to celebrate the academic team's victory. The entire school gathered in the auditorium, buzzing with excitement. Zara sat with her teammates in the front row as the principal praised their historic win. "And now," he said, "I'd like to invite our team captain, Zara Williams, to say a few words." Zara walked to the podium, her heart pounding. The speech the principal had given her to read sat folded in her pocket, untouched. Instead, she looked out at the sea of faces, some friendly, some curious, some still wary. "3 months ago," she began, "I walked through the doors of Oak Ridge Academy as the only black student in a school of over 600. I came here with perfect grades, a scholarship, and the belief that if I worked hard enough, I would belong." The auditorium fell silent. But working hard wasn't enough. Being smart wasn't enough. Being kind wasn't enough. Nothing I did was enough, because some people had already decided who I was based on how I looked. She saw Principal Harrison shifting uncomfortably at the side of the stage, but she continued. "I had teachers who wouldn't call on me, students who wouldn't sit with me. I had to prove myself again and again when others were simply accepted. And I'm standing here now, not because the system worked, but because a few brave people like Mr. Daniels and Olivia Cooper decided to see me as a person. Olivia gave her a small, proud smile from the front row. Winning that trophy was amazing, Zara continued. But if we only celebrate students like me when we bring home trophies, we've learned nothing. True diversity isn't about taking photos for your brochures or checking a box. It's about making room for everyone to belong, every single day. She took a deep breath, looking directly at Principal Harrison now. Oak Ridge can do better. We can be a school where no one has to fight just to be seen, where no one's talent is wasted because they don't look like everyone else. I'm willing to help make that happen, but only if it's real change, not just for show. The silence held for a long moment after she finished. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone began to clap. Others joined in, the applause building until the entire auditorium was on its feet, led by her teammates, by Olivia, by Mr. Daniels, and slowly, reluctantly, by Principal Harrison himself. 3 months later, Zara stood in the main hallway, greeting 5 new students, all from different backgrounds, all nervous on their first day. As the student head of Oak Ridge's new welcoming committee, it was her job to make sure they felt at home from day one. The teachers are mostly cool, she told them as she led them on a tour. And we started a mentorship program you can join if you want. Any questions, you can always come find me. After showing them to their classes, Zara headed to the administrative offices where Mr. Daniels, now the school's diversity coordinator, was waiting. How'd it go? He asked. Good, Zara replied. They're nervous, but they'll be okay. The school feels different now. And it did. The mandatory cultural sensitivity training for faculty had made a visible difference in classrooms. The mentorship program she'd started with Olivia for underrepresented students interested in STEM had secured a grant that would keep it running long after they graduated. Even Principal Harrison, after some initial resistance, had become a surprisingly strong advocate for the changes. As Zara walked to class, she passed her old locker, now decorated with artwork from the elementary school's Pen Pal program. She thought about that first day, how alone she had felt, how invisible. Now other students smiled and greeted her by name, not because she'd won a trophy, but because they knew her, the real her. The school that had once tried to break her spirit now stood as an example of transformation. Not because they had wanted to change, but because one girl had refused to disappear.